Thanks everybody for joining today. I'm Marla DeFrucio. I'm the Director of Operations here at Level Up EQ, and I will officially be kicking us off for our event panel on empowering your employees. I'm going to begin by introducing our fearless founder, Marla Skibbins. Marla is a master certified executive coach, a senior faculty member of CTI, and an awesome person all around. She's been training, coaching, and facilitating for 2 decades all over the world with a focus in Silicon Valley. And she loves to serve teams in tech and biotech. And when she's not rallying our war cry throughout Level Up EQ, you can find her taking a walk with her beloveds, rock climbing, and just being an awesome human being. So Marla, I'm going to let you take it from here.
I love your intro. That's so sweet. Thank you. And thank you all for being here. And I want to thank both Marley and Nicole. I say this each time, and it's worth saying, these events don't happen without a lot of love and a lot of logistics, and you both do that so well. So thank you so much for making this possible, not only for the people that are here today, but also for all the people that download our events and listen to them later. It's such a service that you both do, so thank you. And I just want to say, I think part of why Level Up EQ happened is that I'm passionate about empowering people. When we empower people, we get the best out of them. We get their magical ideas and their energy. And so I think this panel is so very important. And I'm very grateful to have our panelists with us. But before I have them introduce themselves, I'm going to say this is a very casual, organic conversation. And the panelists are going to be talking amongst themselves and sharing their thoughts. And for you all listening, this is your conversation. So be a part of it. Ask questions, because we really do need you to participate and need your thoughts and ideas and interests in the conversation. So Marley already told you where to find the questions. When questions are upvoted, for sure, we will be asking them. So, so please participate. And on that, lovely panelists, please introduce yourselves, and I will start with Rosie.
Thank you so much, Marla. It's great to be here. My name is Rosie Cofre. I am what is the equivalent of a Chief Diversity Officer at UiPath. Specifically, our focus is what we call Just Be Us, justice, belonging, uniqueness, and social human responsibility. It is our movement that we initiated just recently. And I'm super pleased to be here today and have this discussion with everyone.
Thank you. Lisa.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to meet you. Good to be here. I'm Lisa Hill. I head up DEIB, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Belonging. So not quite as cool a name as what Rosie gets to go by. I sort of feel like you come with a cape, Rosie. But it's all good stuff, right? So I had that up for an organization called Inspira, and we're an HR consulting firm, and we do everything in the space of HR. I lead that capability, and then, I'm a subject matter expert in the space of DEIB. I've been in HR for 25 years or so, with lots of stops around the HR field, if you will. So employee relations, learning and development, talent acquisition. So I think that allows me to come to these conversations, not just this conversation today, but conversations around empowerment, and certainly through the lens of DEIB, with a pretty good anchor in people. So I'll say that, and I'm really super excited about this conversation.
Thank you, Lisa. Matt, you're on.
Thank you, Marla, and welcome everybody. Pleasure to be here today. And I'm Matt Johnson, and I'm the head of behavioral science at MotiveX. And what MotiveX is, we're basically an insights company that we're able to basically provide and identify the intrinsic motivations of employees, and mostly utilized for understanding what the friction points of behavior change or adoption initiatives or productivity. So we work with a lot of channel partners, but also directly with organizations, and we also provide experiential consulting and recommendations and, what next step should be, because the pull through is the key. You could have the greatest data in the world if you don't have the mechanism to enact, and that's part of the empowerment conversation today. That's really the vital component. So again, thank you for having me here today, and look forward to being part of the discussion.
Wow, thank you, all of you, Rosie, Lisa, Matt. I really appreciate your wisdom and sharing it with our followers at Level Up EQ. So let's jump in. So here's our first question. What is the role of leadership in empowering others? And anyone, you just jump in if you're passionate, and if not, I'm going to grab you.
Yeah, I'll jump in if everyone's okay with that. Yeah, I thought about this one quite a bit, and I think it comes down to just a simple understanding that to lead, you really have to be able and willing to listen and learn, which means sometimes you lead and sometimes you allow yourself to be led. And that's really hard. That's a component of vulnerability, right? That's difficult when somebody looks and says, well, I'm the one who's responsible for this organization. And therefore, how can I step back and say, I'm now going to be led by my team. And so I think about my own team, and the people on my team have actually been at UiPath for over 3 years. So they know the ins and outs, they have the relationships, they know has worked in the past, who's a little bit easier to work with, who's a little bit more challenging. And so there are times where when it has to do with this body of work, I lead and I will work through this stuff, right? And there are other times where I will step back and I say, okay, here's what I'm trying to do. Lead me and lead our organization. And we've kind of identified who has what skill sets. And I'll point to that person. I'll go, okay, you need to lead us. I'm stepping back. And to me, that really is an element of empowering others and knowing that it is not a single person. It is all of us working together at the right point, the right time. Kind of, I always think about that bicycles that move like this, right? And they go this way. And that's kind of what goes in my head is sometimes you're leading and sometimes you have to step back and be led.
Yeah.
Rosie, it's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, Matt. You want to
No, please. No, go ahead.
I feel like, when I was thinking about this question too, like you're looking at some of the notes I jotted down, honestly, it's so similar. I think maybe the one thing I would add is when I think about what's the role of leadership in empowering others, I really think about it, what's the role in inclusive leadership, right? And it's a nuance, but I think it's a really important one to put forth. And I too, great leaders, great inclusive leaders also bring out the leader in everyone else, right? And I think that really dovetails to your point, Rosie, around leading and being led and knowing when to do one or the other, right? And a lot, because it does empower people. I think about, 5, 6, 7 years ago when I was in a different role and how others allowed me those opportunities to lead and what that did for me personally and my own growth and ultimately what it did for the organization, right? Because you're seeing my uniqueness, you're seeing my special talents, my special sauce, and what that value is.
Right, and that's I think the underlining the money shot is when people feel valued, people are leaving because they feel like their work isn't valued. But when you say, "Hey, you lead me," you've got this, you take it, they're feeling valued and seen, and then they're going to want to stay. They're going to want, and so they've been given the opportunity. So Matt, what were you wanted to chime in on this?
Sure. No, both Rosie and Lisa covered the lion's share of everything I also am invested in from a standpoint of my beliefs there. But I think one of the things that I've found that still hasn't totally been washed out of our kind of organizational systems these days is I think a lot of whether you call managers or leaders, a lot of the perception is that it has to be a ton of hard work. And I'm not saying that being a leader isn't hard work, but it's more the fact that they hear the, kind of fire and brimstone self-help people to talk about, if you're that charismatic leader, your people will run through brick walls for you and do all that. It's really about, taking the bricks away or opening the door for them by understanding, from a bottom up level, what their strengths are, what their motivations are, personalities, the whole construct that kind of provides a 360, but really kind of getting out of their own way and looking at the fact that it's not about changing the person necessarily. It's about understanding the person and then providing the resources, the environment, the collaboration partners or the opportunities for them to feel self-empowered, where it becomes, not that you don't need to do anything anymore, but it becomes one of those things where instead of the employee feeling like, well, it's up to the company or the manager to provide them with the resources, they become far more proactive in developing their own, whether that's their own role or personal development or whatever that is, because they feel empowered to do it by that leader who trusts them, not as threatened by them.
Yeah.
And let me jump in. Sorry, Marla.
Go, Rosie, go, Rosie.
Real quick to kind of loop all these discussions, this is why when I said it's about listening and learning, right? It's everything that Lisa and Matt said it's what those leaders are doing is different now, right? It is having to open themselves up, and they don't know what that next step is or how to do that unless they're listening and they're learning, and they're learning through other people, and they're learning through mistakes, right? They're learning through, I thought this person needed this kind of resource, or that's door that I thought had to open for them. And they're willing to say, oh my gosh, we got it wrong, but let's keep moving ahead, because it happens, right? And that's what a strong leader, an inclusive leader really does, is to say, I don't have all the answers. We can try and figure it out together, but I will do what I can, and I'll listen and I'll learn, and we'll get it wrong and we'll fail together and we'll get it right together, right? And so it just kind of brings it all, to a full loop again, based on what Matt and Lisa are saying. Yeah, I completely agree. But those leaders have to be open to listening and learning. They can't assume that they know all the answers and that they're always going to get it right, because they're not. This is all a whole new ball game of how we're going to empower, the people around us, whether they're direct reports or not, by the way. So when I think about when you empower others, they're not just people who report into you. They're people that you interact with.
Right. It's everybody. Well, and I think it's really powerful what you're saying, because when leaders are willing to be vulnerable or open, and people can see that they fail or they don't get it right, or they don't always understand, when we're thinking about how do leaders empower others, when somebody, a peer or someone below them sees them do that, then they don't think they have to have it perfectly cooked before they jump out and do something. They're modeling empowerment. I'm empowered to try something and fail and be open about it, not try to hide it. And that just creates a learning environment and a learning organization, because everybody's learning together, heading towards great and excellent and amazing and, so forth. So
it's a ripple effect, Marla. I mean, it's a ripple effect, right? So somebody all of a sudden sees their leader and they're empowered, and they go, okay, then it's okay for me to fail. And then through that, they're empowering others around them. Again, it doesn't have to be a direct report. So it is a ripple effect.
Exactly. So, okay, so how can we make our culture such that everyone feels that safety and comfort and welcomed in general, and also in, like we're talking about failing, but I think it's also about just in general, you can bring, like you're saying, your whole self.
I'll jump in on this one. What sort of a core philosophy or tenet at Inspira is this notion, it's not ours, by the way, it's through a body of work that lives outside of us, but around the notion that no place is really safe, right? It's about a brave space. And this brave space is where we allow and encourage dialogue, right? Because if we're not doing those things, then you're just getting stuck, right? You're just repeating lather, rinse, repeat, and it's like banging your head against a wall. So I like to think of it less about a safe space and more about a brave space, in carving out the room to have those conversations, right? And they don't have to, I feel like sometimes we talk about this stuff, particularly DEIB, it can come off as, I don't even know if it comes off, it's just the perception of, oh, it's kumbaya, it's touchy-feely. It's, yeah, I know, Rosie, me too. I'm like, please. I mean, it's not. I mean, there might be moments of that in anything, but this is really about like creating containers where people can talk, can be vulnerable. And by the way, being vulnerable doesn't mean crying and happy. It means owning mistakes. It means saying, I don't have all the answers, you lead, all of those things that have already been said. So I really believe that that brave space helps us to solve from the inside out if we're doing it right.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, I love that whole concept about the brave space instead of safe space, because safe space can seem like it's kind of lowest common denominator instead of being a more positive, again, proactive thing. But one of the things that I've seen really successful leaders or organizations or components of organizations do is the fact that when there's initiatives that are taking place that need kind of the full slate of collaboration, everything, that they frame it up not in a compliance sense, and I think there's just too much that, regardless of what it is, whether it's D&I or gender parity or whatever they're doing, that they frame up in a compliance sense, where it's sticks and carrots utilized, where I've seen tons of incremental change in that environment is when leaders are able to frame it up for the individuals of the team in a standpoint of, by moving forward with this, these are all the choices that you will now open yourself up to from a standpoint, even like something as boring as a CRM, from the fact of having, financial acumen that'll help you, eventually if you're running your own P&L, or, what the customer preview is, not just, that you're blocking and tackling and checking boxes, but hey, if you really do this the right way, these are the gains that your customers are going to have, which is going to lead to the stickiness and retention and the NPS scores and, the perception out in the environment. So it creates a more holistic picture than just saying, we do this because we have to or have been told to. And it's like, if you frame it up in the choices arena, what matters to the individuals, they can get behind that, because it's like almost like a self-selection of, I'm doing this because of, X, because of, I believe in my customers, or it's for the environment, or for, whatever that cause is.
Yeah, before answering that question, I want to tap on a couple of things you guys said. Lisa, we also believe in that brave space, right? Safe space is just one component of it. It's ground level. If people are not comfortable opening up and having these difficult conversations, then you have not created a brave space. That is really where you need to come together and respectfully disagree sometimes. Respectfully understand that you don't understand each other, and it's okay, right? And that's about a brave space. And to Matt's point, and I know that Lisa and I kind of joked about people go, it's fluffy, whatever. There's a big change. People haven't realized there's a big change in the industry where companies are doing ESG reports, right? Environmental, social, and governance. And the body of work that we're talking about sits right in the middle of the social piece of it. It's about 60 to 70% what sits in there. And when you think about it, our investors are looking at those ESG reports, right? CEO of BlackRock, actually, there was an article and he said, I will not include, any company that doesn't have an ESG report, I won't include them in my portfolio. So that's a pretty strong statement. And when we think about it, we think about the fact, why should people care? To Matt's point and Lisa's point, why should people care? Because if you are a public company, then investors are looking at your ESG report, and they are using it as one of the determinants as to whether you're a company worth investing in, which, indirectly, let's just say indirectly, influences the valuation of your company and indirectly influences the valuation of your stock. So if you think it's fluffy and you don't care, then you probably don't care about your pocketbook either. I'm just going to leave it there. So it is becoming much more critical. I've been in this space 20 years. This is the first time in my entire life that I've started to see this kind of focus, interest, and understanding where we aren't having to justify why this is important. Our investors are telling us, this is important. I want to know, because we don't even want to start to invest in you if we don't see that you're not just you're doing something. What are you doing? How are you doing it? How are you making progress? What areas you're addressing? So it becomes pretty important. Specifically to the question, right? I think everything Elisa and Matt said are actually spot on. And I would also add empathy. Empathy is so key to understanding how you create the space where people feel that they belong. That's the term we use, right? People need to feel like they belong. And an undertone of that for me is to recognize that people, especially when if you reflect just on the last couple of years of what we've gone through the pandemic, is that we've always talked about companies going through, change management and change. People go through it too. And we haven't stopped to realize that there's these social, political, and economic dynamics that are constantly in play, which is why, Lisa, our body of work just keeps changing all the time, and Matt, right? Because it's constantly in change. Well, that's a very personal thing. And so if we think that, hey, this is how we're going to create this place of belonging for people, and once we have it done, hey, we're good for the next 10 years, then we're going to miss the mark. We have to constantly be on top of understanding those dynamics that are happening around us, because they start to influence what really helps people feel like this is a place where they belong. What was valuable, and important 5-10 years ago isn't the same as it is today. Today, I remember clearly 5 years ago, we weren't talking about belonging language in the workplace. We now have a whole initiative where we're looking at what is that language that's appropriate? How do we make people feel like this is a place where they belong because of how we're communicating internally and then externally, right? Those are things that didn't come up. There was a word that came up where it's, postmortem. When you do a project, postmortem, right? Before the pandemic, probably not a big deal. Now, and we've added it to our list, right? That's just one example on how things are changing. That's a personal change. That's because people are going through personal change management because of how the pandemic has, impacted them directly and indirectly. So we just really have to take that into consideration. We've always focused on change management in a company. How do you manage it? How do you get people through that? But what about at a personal level? And if we aren't focused on that, I think we're going to really have a hard time creating a space of belonging for anyone.
Right. Right. I mean, I'm just struck by what you're saying, Rosie, when I see it from a different angle than you do, working with clients, but just because the personal change is so pervasive, nobody has escaped some level of change in their life because of what happened with the pandemic and the racial unrest. And so, I think that what I'm appreciating in, hearing what you said about BlackRock is that we have to think about this now. There's no way not to think about what's going on to human beings, which is so lovely to see them being empowered and going, hey, look, you don't resonate with me anymore. I don't belong. I'm out of here. Which there wasn't that level of empowerment at the individual level, contributors and all the way up to VPs and CEOs. So I know in my heart that when businesses adopt something, it becomes a kind of household thing. When we're empowering or thinking about belonging, it isn't just at work. We start thinking about that because we spend so much time at work. We're thinking about it everywhere. We're thinking about in the soccer field or the school or whatever things we're doing in our community. Do we belong? Is this a place for us? So.
And we influence that too. It's interesting, sorry, that you say that, because my kids, I've got 3 of them, they'll take it right into the school, and they'll have the same comment because they hear my conversations, and we'll talk about it, and they take it right into the school, and they'll challenge things and they'll question things, and they'll really, they're so much more empowered than I ever envisioned, but we are enabling them, right? Through how we're interacting and things we're doing, and the schools are also, acknowledging that they need to empower their students to create a better tomorrow, create a better school environment. So it is way beyond just the workplace.
Yeah.
And I would double down on that from like you were saying, Marla, that people are like, hey, if I don't feel like I belong here, I'm out of here. People won't even come.
Yeah.
Right? It's like that's the whole other thing. And
or they show up and they're tuned out, right, Lisa?
Yeah, stay and quit was just even worse, right?
Such a waste.
Such a waste for them too, right? For everyone. And I feel like, if it's one, there is this, the BlackRock, I think I didn't know that. I think that's a terrific example. And what becomes performative and what becomes real rooted work, right? Because those folks that are coming, especially those newer to the workforce, they're like, I see right through it and I'm out, right? They will call you. Call you on it. They are very savvy and very smart. And it's starting with our kids, right? And moving into that into the workplace, they won't put up with it. So it is one of those things like, look, if you're not willing to truly own this work and move it forward truly and not in a performative way, you're going to miss out on talent. And we already know that talent is at a premium, right?
Right. And I want to say, and how do we keep it at a premium so that people, because there is a response, right? Because as companies are struggling and losing people and financially they're being impacted, then there's a listening, there's an opening, there's Matt out there, doing reports and telling companies, here's where people want to go or don't want to go, or where the stuck places are. I just think I remember talking to a client just recently that was saying, yeah, I called and did some due diligence on, he was talking about an opportunity that he was thinking about taking advantage of. He's like, oh no, I found out just hearing 2 people tell me, no, don't go there. Here's why. I mean, that's what people are doing now. They're just like doing their due diligence before they ever go anywhere. So that's, and that's the beauty. It's like power to the people in a way. And what's great is then the dancing of organizations are coming in to say, well, we have to dance now. Like you're saying, Rosie, they're listening now. Oh, we have to listen to this now.
Yeah. And they need to be agile, Marla. That's the thing, right? They need to be agile before, this concept of, well, we need to do 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay, great. Well, people don't like, 3 anymore. We'll just swap that out. Right now it's 3A. Let's keep moving. I mean, sometimes you have to knock down the whole thing and start over again, right? Literally, candidates are coming through and going, look, I don't want to be a check in the box for you. Let's be honest. They're like, I don't want to be and the minute I figure out I'm just a check in the box for you for whatever reason, like you need to fill a quota of whatever it may be, I'm not going to be part of that. And they will walk away. And so how we show up and why we're doing this work is very important, but companies have to be agile. They have to be willing to change. If you think about it from a product life cycle, right? This concept about agility and how you're developing products, that's, 10 plus years old, right? It's not longer. So we've built it into our products. We've built into our services this concept of, being agile. But we haven't built it into how we manage and empower our people and create a place of belonging. It's not there. There's let me just put this in place. I don't have to worry about it. And I need to focus on products and sales and everything else. Well, not really.
No, it's a big
right. Not really. You need to focus on this piece as well. And you need to create that same framework of being agile, just like you do it with your products and your services.
Right.
Right. And I don't think that's there yet. I haven't really seen it. It's a struggle.
Right, and it's very parallel to change initiatives. I mean, one of the biggest thing that people folks have talked about for decades now is that the reason why big change management initiatives or acquisitions, mergers, whatever, don't stick the way they should is because 90+% of all the resources and time and attention is put on process and operations and not on the people. Who's going to pull that through? It's the people. So you could have the greatest technology, you could have the greatest, financial, modeling of what this could save you in 3 years based on a new, procurement system and everything. Well, the people are going to be the ones that have to utilize it in the right ways in order for it to work and actually be, used so it actually, creates positive change. And it's always, you hear these big consulting companies, not all of them, I won't name anyone, but, they'll do all the, they have all the, they go like gangbusters on, again, the implementation and the, that part of it, but then they put the junior team on the people part, the experiential, engagement or how they get people. And then it's not going to stick because people, they see right through that. They know that they're not, they're just supposed to, again, a compliance thing. They create a compliance mechanism instead of showing how this benefits, the WIFM for the, for the internal employees. So
right. So this is kind of an off the cuff question, which is, well, so how do we keep that happening? How do we keep that the dance happening instead of the employer is pushing it all? and people are a second thought. Do you think it's enough of a wave now that it's not going to stop being that organizations have to think like they get a big piece of the pie instead of a tiny piece of the pie, the people part? That would be one question. And then if you do think it's going to slip, how do we keep it happening? How do we help organizations see that when we leverage people's hearts, belonging is about heart, bravery is about heart, capturing somebody's heart, it's not about charisma, it's about them and that they feel like this is the place for them. So I guess my question is, how do we keep this going as opposed to it starting to dwindle and go back to normal and people go back to work and they all of a sudden don't feel empowered? I don't know if you have an answer for that.
I think because it has to be baked in, right? It has to be normalized and part of the process. And I say all the time, specifically around DEIB, that it's so often, it is changing, but it's there for sure. This thing that sits over here, right? And it's another thing we're asking people to do, often leaders of leaders who are down in the weeds, leading the people who do the work, who already have an overflowing platter, right? And so now we're asking, oh, hey, by the way, when you're doing this, think about that and do this. DEIB must be the lens through which we work. And then it just is, right? Then it just is. And it's how we think about performance management. It's how we think about compensation. It's how we think about providing benefits that meet all employee needs, not just the ones you have now, but future employees, right? Those are just a few examples. But I think it is the only way to sustain and truly move the needle.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that we've done at UiPath is, our purpose is accelerating human achievement. So we are very human-centric in everything we do. We start with the human, right? And the technology is an element that enables a human element, with a human component around it. And you see how we integrate that in everything we do. So we think, for example, so we do automation, right? And there is this, what people say, this dark side to automation, and this scary part of you're automating so that people don't have jobs anymore, right? What we're actually doing is we're automating so that people are freed up and repositioned strategically. And then we're going out and we're training a lot of people. We don't have enough people in the industry for the skills that we need. So we actually, have a lot of ways to enable people and actually to give them skills that are going to bring them up from, a level of poverty or, whatever it may be, which is generational. It just moves forward. We look at it, to Lisa's point, we're embedded in everything we do. So we think about how do we accelerate human achievement, right? What does that mean from an automation perspective? And even talking to customers. And so there's a couple of things that have come up, and we have something that we're toying with that's called Bots Belong, right? So it's not just about elevating people. We step back and we go, this concept around belonging, if we can, internally, and then we work with our customers, because our customers are very interested in this, we use automation to free up people's time, because then they take that time and they invest it in themselves. There's that concept of wellness. And when we have that well-being, which is part of our social human responsibility, which is why we don't call it corporate social responsibility, we call it social human responsibility for a reason. It's embedded in there. We take that extra time and people can invest in themselves and their wellness. And wellness is directly linked to belonging. And when they've taken care of themselves, then they turn around, they want to give to their communities.
Yeah.
And that's a concept around wellness, and there's research out there as well. So it loops back to that concept around belonging. So it's embedded in that. Again, we're very early on. Don't ask me for a use case because we're not there yet. We're still looking at that, looking at how to do that. But that's an idea that we're starting to play with, that our customers are asking about. And then there's a concept, as Lisa said, there's all this benefits, but we're also looking at sales enablement. And that conversation when we look, beyond the products that we sell, that our customers and our partners are saying, hey, it's great, you got a great product, you have a great platform, you're evolving, but where are our shared values? Because when you come talk to me, Mr. or Mrs. Salesperson, I don't want you to talk to me all the time about what you can sell me now, what you can upsell me on, what you can, and where I can spend my money. What else do we have in common? And they're looking for those shared values to say, we both care about empowering our employees. We both care about our communities. We care, like, what are those shared values?
Yeah.
And if we can connect on that level, what I really want with you is a relationship. And once we have that relationship, we can talk business. That's an easy one. but do we have shared values? And so we're also embedding ourselves in those concepts and working with our sales enablement team so we can tell that story and connect with our customers and our partners at a whole different level, one that's important to them as much as it is to us.
That's great. So how do we create situations where all employees find meaning and purpose and fulfillment? I think it kind of is dovetailing with what you're talking about, Rosie, and they find it in their work, not just outside.
So yeah, that discussion should be table stakes, right? It's really from the equivalent of the Maslow's, bottom of the Maslow's pyramid when it comes to those type of things. But again, it really comes down to the leadership, frontline management or leadership, really understanding, and this is very 10,000 foot view, but looking at motivations and skills, and just because someone's good at something doesn't mean they like it. I've have numerous stories within the organizations I work with that someone was great at number crunching. They might be, an industrial organizational psychologist, and they're great at doing all the validation work, whatever, but they're a people person. And so now they're put in their, quote unquote, calculator dungeon, and they're great at it, but they want to be in front of customers. And, so then it's like the golden goose, and you're pulling out the last golden egg, and then they're gone in 6 months, where they could have been someone who could have been leading the parts of the organization 5 years from there. So again, I think, EQ has a lot to do with it, but it's really, understanding your people. And if collaboration or teamwork is important to someone, it doesn't mean you have to change completely the job role. It just means, hey, if I'm an IT person in my cubicle all day, or now at home all day, maybe it's that 3 hours a week I'm working with the sales team to work on sales enablement, from a technology standpoint, where I feel like I'm part of a bigger, of an ownership of a bigger piece of what we're trying to do as an organization. So it's that. So it's, and I know it seems, and I think this is where sometimes it gets stuck, because when you look at it in that way, I think they take it too literally and feel like it's so granular and so over-engineered that it's impossible, especially with enterprise, companies of 10,000, 30,000, whatever. It's all incremental, right? If you have a manager of 10 people and, they understand their team and understand their people, again, you're going to have bad managers that aren't going to care, right? They just want as much time and productivity out. But that doesn't mean everybody shouldn't do it. Just because you have 40% or 20% of the organization that's not going to follow through. Just imagine what if 60% did and just had incremental changes. That could mean, an average tenure of an employee going from 1.8 years to 2.4 years. And just with that measure, the intellectual capital and the productivity and the engagement levels and the impact of the legacy of the organization is, just astronomically affected. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
Lisa, what would you say to that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Go
ahead.
I think it's basics, right? I think it's about curiosity. I think always staying curious, right? Asking questions. Marla, you're a coach, right? So you're not doling out advice. You're asking them to find it within themselves, right? You're asking them to be curious. And I think that's what it boils down to, curiosity and listening.
Yeah. And curiosity for a particular thing, right? What does turn this person on versus how are they going to fix this problem? Or what is their purpose, or what is fulfilling for them? And how do we give that to them in their work so that they want to stay?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing too is, I'm sorry, but just real quick.
Go, Matt, and then we'll
No, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
But part of it also is, with initiatives and really important ones like, D&I and gender parity and, other types of affinity programs, like what the organization needs to understand, and so many don't do this, they end up perpetuating the stereotype with the type of programs they put in place, instead of having a more individualistic look at how diversity can create innovation and, new ideas and everything else that that is part of it. So again, it's going back to my first point, from 30 minutes ago. The compliance or the checkbox thing has to be put on the back burner. Now, I'm not talking about things like taking sexual harassment courses, but when it comes to things within the organization that are day to day, that it has to be looked at not from a compliance standard. It has to be looked at from a standpoint of how this affects me, how it benefits me, how it benefits the ecosystem of internal and external customers, the whole kind of the whole
All of
gamut.
that. Yeah, Rosie.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, the thread kind of through all of this is disruption. I enjoy disruption. I know a lot of people don't, right? A lot of people go, oh, why are you changing things on me? And I have found that most people don't like it. And so I have to be very careful because I kind of enjoy it when things kind of are just kind of the same. I go, well, why aren't we pushing that button instead of that one, right? Why aren't we going that way instead of that way, right? Why are we going, and people go, oh, why are you trying to change things? Why not? Like, why aren't we trying to do something? So you have to go at an appropriate pace, depending on who you're with, but disruption, right? And really kind of challenging these things. This is what I hear Lisa and Matt talking about, right? Is that disruption, that allowing people to go over and try things out. That's disruptive for some people. People go, well, that's simple. It's not. I mean, stretch assignments have been around for a very long time, but they were held by a very small number of people who've been, kind of they're grooming them for something. I'm talking about stretch assignments across the entire board, across for everybody.
Yeah.
That's very disruptive. All those stretch assignments have been around for a while. And I've run entire programs where we've done that. And it is amazing to see, we did one where 98% of the people stretched into a whole different function. I mean, you had HR going into IT going into finance. It was amazing, right? And all the benefits that came out of it. That's an element of disruption people are not, necessarily comfortable with. And, something that Matt alluded to as well, this you stretch out the years. I call it years and careers. In that, if you tell somebody, I'd like you, we're always concerned about attrition and people are leaving us. But we don't stop to think about how do we think about this differently, right? It's not about keeping somebody at the company against their will, and creating an environment where they don't feel like they belong and you want them around for 10, 15 years, right? That's yesterday, but today's world says, but if I can keep you in this role for 2 years and then I help you move into another one for another 3 years and I move you into another one for another 5 years, before you know it, and I do know people have gone through this, they've been at a company for 10, 15, 20 years, but they've held 6, 7, 8 different roles. That again is disruptive. People see it happening, but they look the other way and they don't want to give it a name. They don't want to acknowledge it. They don't want to support it. They don't want to enable it because it's disruptive. And the minute you kind of open it up and say, how do we make this happen? Years and careers concept, how do we make that happen for everyone? It becomes disruptive, right? So for me, the undertone of all of it is disruption. We have to constantly keep pushing on that button called disruption. Sometimes it's small and you let it see if it's time. It's a timing around disruption, right? Sometimes you push a button and it goes, people just like, and you go, okay, it's not the right time. We'll push this button around disruption. And then you go back to that button a year or two later, no lies, and it's the right time. And you push that button, all of a sudden, everyone's ready for it. But you have to continuously find those little disruption buttons and keep pushing them. And that, I firmly believe is what starts to create that place of meaning and purpose and fulfillment for people, because there's always something there for them, whether they want to do it through a stretch assignment, whether they want to go into a completely new role. I've seen companies that pull people out of their roles and put them into, their foundations, their nonprofit foundations for a year or 2 years. That's disruptive as well. And then they come back into a different role. So really disruption, I think, is the undertone of all of this, creating that, longevity for people.
Well, I think that's the growth, and I think people need growth. They want growth. They also get scared of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
Matt.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, one of the other things we see a lot is, and I've seen this throughout, my professional career, is that managers, and it's become even, over the recent years. I mean, there is no 1 to 2, 3 to 5 year plans anymore. It's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, which is sad from a standpoint of, again, looking at innovation and long-term, things that were strategic initiatives that may take a little longer, but they're going to be worth it in the payoff. But anyway, my point is though that in today's organizations, that managers don't have even half the story about the available resources that are out there, and not that they don't know about them from a standpoint of just they see them and but they don't understand them, and they can't just, like, if you don't understand something as a manager, there's been tons of studies in my old former organization, enterprise engagement. We did a lot of work around incentive comp, and not about designing the plans but the creating campaigns, communication marketing campaigns, because the one thing we found is that if a manager had 3 or less conversations with their employees about their comp plan, it actually did more harm than good. And so in order to educate the managers, and so they could have intelligent conversations around these topics. And that's the thing we find when there's gaps in, say, professional development or learning. They might, the company usually has, mentoring programs, tuition reimbursement, or, some type of, Coursera or other type of, learning besides this traditional LMS that the managers aren't even aware of. So if there's a gap there, that's something that their team is seeking out, professional development. They can't just, automatically get them into a room and say, hey, here's the information, or here's the links to X, Y, and Z programs that you can be taking advantage of. They don't know. So it's like they're not championing those things because it's either the onboarding is too transactional, where they're not understanding all these, whatever it is. I think that time and just the nuance of the managers understanding what is the ecosystem of things that can create that self evolution of the employee and feel that they are empowered. But if they don't know it, they can't talk to them about it. So that's a big point.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to add something to what Matt just said too. I think there's another element to that, right? When you're talking about, managers not knowing or people leaders not knowing their resources, I think that goes down to the individuals as well, right? They don't always know the other part of it. So you have to start with building trust. No one's going to open up to you. I don't care what role you're in, and even less if the person's reporting up into you. You have to build the trust. You have to open up. You have to, enable that conversation, which, is a two-way street. So then you start to learn, what that person wants, what they need, how do you enable? Because if you throw a bunch of resources at them and they go, yeah, I don't care about any of that, you're actually kind of starting to become annoying, right? You don't really understand this is what I need. Well, you haven't told that person who can enable you what you need as well. And so that trust is that underlying component of it. And sometimes it's small. Like, I'll tell you, I'm an early riser. I love getting up early in the morning. I don't mind having calls with Europe at 5 o'clock in the morning. I have somebody on my team who sits on the same time zone as I do. And she said, please do not schedule any meetings before 7 o'clock. Oh, okay. I would have never known that because she was on some of these meetings at 5:30 in the morning. I had no idea, but she was able to say, I can't do this. I mean, this is going to kill me if I'm having this 5 o'clock. And so sometimes there's small things where the person opens up and says, if you could just make a small change or operate a little bit this way or enable me this way, right? Or I'm really excited about this, I'd like to work on this, or, those kinds of things, that communication going back and forth is absolutely critical. And it starts with trust. It absolutely starts with trust that needs to be fostered ongoing.
Yeah. And I want to just underline that. Disruption can't happen without trust. Sharing who we are and what we value and what turns us on as an individual won't happen unless there's trust. Growth and learning won't happen unless there's trust. Pushing back on leadership and saying, no, we're going the wrong direction. And that dance you were talking about, all of you were earlier, doesn't happen without trust. And I think that's the question here. That could be a whole other panel, which is how do we create an environment, especially Matt, with what you're saying about, to me, when it's a 3-month or a 1-month window, instead of a CEO or an executive team being there for years, where they're holding long-term initiatives happening in an organization, things changing all the time doesn't create trust. And so, so much of it comes back to, if we're going to take that wedge of human and make it bigger in an organization, it all starts with trust. Every relationship you're in, whether it's good or bad, has elements of lack of or trust embedded in it. And And that's the $64 billion question in a way, is how do we create that? So
yeah, I was going to say to that point, Marla, I mean, one of the things that we've seen so predominantly during the last, two years is one of our intrinsic motivations is rationality. And that's kind of the more taking the emotions out of decision making, or the logic or the why kind of thing. And so that gap has gone up tremendously, from the employee's point of view, because there's a lot of decisions now that are being made in a vacuum, or
right.
Because things are changing so much, or because of it just being like, God, we changed the benefits plan again. Like, that's the third time and there's no, it could be the greatest benefits plan in the world, but if the company doesn't, everybody goes to the worst case scenario when it comes to filling in the blanks.
Right.
They do their own Mad Libs when it comes to, if they don't have the real reason, and the rumor mill starts, and that's erodes the trust and everything, even if it's benign. They people make their own narrative. So that's one of the key things is, just even if it's something simple, just communicate why. I mean, some of the best stories I've heard.
It's a good relationship, right? You talk about it instead of just, here's the mandate,
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I want to thank you all for the amazing conversation. And what sticks in my mind as we're closing is, the being led and listening and trust and belonging is such a huge, important part of the empowerment that we were all kind of discussing today, and and being willing to disrupt how we've always done it, to do it in a way that might really benefit people, or push on those held beliefs, and see, are those the beliefs that we want to hold on to or not, in an organization, in a human being, wherever it is. And I also I in closing want to say, the next one that we're going to be doing an event like this, where we're going to have amazing panelists discussing career conversations, which is in the same territory. How do we have those conversations with people? Is going to be happening on March 16th. So please, folks that are listening, either afterwards, hopefully you'll be able to make the 16th on March. And I want to say March 14th, we're doing, Level Up is doing a workshop that speaks to much of what we've talked about here, which is a coaching skills workshop for leaders. Leaders think they know how to build trust, and they think they know how to listen, and they think they know how to be human-centric, and they think they know how to be a coach, and they don't. And if you want to get a taste of what it actually looks like to be a leader who coaches, reach out to us. It's on our website. You can register for that. And again, I want to say thank you so much, Rosie, Lisa, and Matt, for your heart to begin with, because you really are giving yourselves to creating environments and looking for environments that empower people. And that's language that's starting in a way to lose its meaning. But when I think about empowering people, and I think you do too, that it's the magic of the human being. They have a genius that they came here to bring. And when you give somebody a place that they can dare to try to be that genius, I mean, the sharehold will go up, the productivity will go up, the engagement will go up, the time people stay will go up, because you'll have that discretionary mind and heart bandwidth that they wouldn't have given if you didn't empower them. So thank you each for for all the work you do in the world, even from the kids hearing you on your calls, and then they go out and do the same thing. To the love you give to the people in your organizations that help them want to be better and do better and try things and be brave. So thank you so much. And thank you, listeners. And We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what other topics you'd like to hear from people, and events we could do that would be a support to you. So thank you so much. And I will give you 5 minutes back of your day. And thank you so much and be well. Take care. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you, Marla.
Thank you, everybody.